How about opening your books with me to exercise 21-11, a good starting place. We're in the middle of 3 chapters that are connected. We did job order last week. We're doing the process this week. And the week we return from break, we use standard cost systems. They have a lot in common, and you've been hearing me reiterate that over and over. I'm concerned about the flow of costs through the accounts, the journal entries that you make to record those things. If you weren't pleased with your quiz score, I would suggest that you practice quickly and make sure that you understand that concept. We're not talking about journal entries a whole lot this week because we are assumed to know them. I'll confess to you that I don't have the solution posted on the class website yet. It was my intent to have it there by yesterday. I'll try to do it by the time I leave today. Okay? So you could go there and practice the version you took, or go there and practice the version that was given on Friday. 21-11 is on page 944. And says the polishing department of our manufacturing company has the following production and manufacturing cost information for September. Materials are entered at the beginning of the process, an important assumption. There are 2 paragraphs here. The first, labeled production, seems to have unit information in it. The one labeled manufacturing costs seems to have dollar information that we would refer to at an appropriate time. The instructions are: compute equivalent units of production for materials, and when you have, compute equivalent units of production for conversion cost for the month of September. B, compute unit cost for materials, and when you've finished, compute unit cost for conversion cost for the month. And finally, C, determine the cost to be assigned to the units transferred out and those still in process. This sounds very familiar. This is exactly what we did, with one exception. Exactly what we did in Monday's lecture. I would prefer that there be one other instruction before the letter A. In the steps that you've heard described, what should the first step be? If you're willing to respond to that question, would you talk to me right now? Brandy?
Determine the balance in the working process.
No, but that's a good wrong answer. Shane?
Determine the flow of physical units?
The physical units, the actual units that we're dealing with. You know, I've tried to skip this step. In my rebellious nature, when I was learning average method as opposed to FIFO that I'd done for years, and when I was seeing the books approach, those kinds of things, I tried to skip this step over and over and over again. And invariably, I would get in trouble. I think it's good to think about the units for which we're responsible, the physical units. And I think there are 2 groups of these: those that we're entrusted with and those that we have accounted for. Now, give me some topical names here. Anybody? Shane, you're the one that started me out here. How are we going to break this down? What goods am I responsible for? What units am I responsible for? What names shall be given these, Shane?
Beginning inventory?
Yeah. There were some goods here to start with. And Shane?
Added?
Those that we started this month is correct. The ones that we had to start with and those that came in that we began working on. And these are the ones that are to be accounted for. So when we sum this, that's what our boss is looking at us saying: you're responsible for these. What did you do with them? Our response to the question, what did you do with these goods, could be described how? I'm going to get Shane off the hook and ask you to participate a bit. What 2 things could possibly happen to these goods? With?
We could finish working
Yes.
on them. And,
We'd have finished them, or
we're in the middle of the working process.
we didn't. We'd have finished them or we didn't. Yes?
Right.
We either finished them or we're still working on them. We finished them or they were not finished. And we'll call this total accounted for. So that'd be a good thing to tell your boss. These are the things I did with them. Now, I've got 4 spots for numbers here. How about let's read the paragraph described as production, the one that contains all the unit stuff. I skipped over it. I didn't see any point in us reading it until we were ready to hear it. I think we might be. Beginning inventory of 1,600 units that are 100% complete as to materials and 30% complete as to conversion cost. Units started during the period were 18,400. Ending inventory of 5,000 units were 10% complete as to conversion cost. I think the numbers are there that belong here. If you're able and willing to tell me any of these 4 numbers, raise your hand and tell me one. Aaron?
1,600 on beginning.
Beginning inventory consisted of 1,600 units. I need a new volunteer. Tell me one of these numbers. With
Unit started is 18,400.
18,400 were started, which means this sum is 20,000, which means this sum is 20,000. Yes?
Yes.
Are we given any information about this? Sam?
Not finished goods is 5,000.
Ending inventory consists of 5,000 units, you tell me, Sam? What else do we know, class?
Finished goods.
Does it say this number?
No.
It doesn't say it,
No.
but we can figure it out. This number must be
15,000.
15,000 units were finished because it had to add to 20. Now, that's set up a lot like the exercise we did in class on Monday. That doesn't mean that they're all going to be set up that way. They typically give us some variation of that. Sometimes they give us all the numbers. Sometimes they give us just enough that we can figure out one. Sometimes they give us this information and don't give us this information. If you think about what we really have to know, we have to know this. We can't work the problem if they don't give us enough information to figure out this part. Okay? So, there are 20,000 units for which we're accountable. We want to know, ultimately, C, determine the cost to be assigned to these goods. It helps, in my opinion, to know where we're going. Our goal is to find the cost of these units. To get there, they've laid the steps out for us. After you find the physical units, then A, compute the equivalent units for materials. Let's stop right there. If you can help me find the equivalent units for materials, I wish you'd volunteer and talk to me right this minute. Josh?
For beginning inventory, it would be 480 dollars.
Keep going.
And not dollars. And it would be 10% of 5,000, so it would be 500 for ending inventory.
There's a little trick going here, Josh, and I think you might have fallen for it. There is a phrase, the last sentence of the first paragraph, just above the word production, that says all materials were entered at the beginning of the process. And at some point I need to tell you the rest of the story about all those percentages in there. But the percentages usually apply to conversion cost. Even this phrase, 1,600 units that are 100% complete as to materials, is the same thing, different words, as the phrase materials are entered at the beginning of the process. That's the same thing. We have all the materials that we need. There's no need to multiply by anything. It's simply a matter of finding the right numbers to use. Joshua, on the hook or off the hook?
I guess on.
Was that on or off? I didn't know.
We'll call it on.
On?
On.
Then let's give you another try. Help me describe the equivalent units in production for materials. Shane's hand was up at the same time yours was. Let's use him as a lifeline.
Use it.
Shane.
For materials, beginning inventory was 1,600 and started was 5,000.
But the materials that are in the beginning inventory were here last month and partially complete last month. And that's when the materials were requisitioned for them. I want to know the total materials I'm accountable for this month. Eloisa, can you help me?
For the finished goods, they will be 15,000, and for the finished 5,000.
These numbers? Just like this? No calculations? No percentages? Will this always work?
Yeah.
It will.
If they
It will.
tell you that.
This isn't always. Do you remember a few minutes ago I said this is not essential, but this is essential? We can't get along without this, folks. When you've set this up right and gotten these numbers, this part of it is equivalent units of production for materials. Because our assumption is all the materials are added at the beginning of production, then that's what's on the top part of that. Is that true or not? Finished, not finished, that's this right here. That is equivalent units of production for materials. Materials are added at the beginning. I have to have a material in order to work on it. I have to have that unit of material to change it into something else. This is equivalent units of production for materials every time. Josh?
What was the initial question?
It's A. Compute equivalent units of production for materials. And when you have finished, compute equivalent units of, compute equivalent units of production for conversion cost. I need a volunteer. Can you help me? Nick, your hand up?
Sure. So we have 1,500 or 15,000, and then 10% of that 5,000 is 500.
Are you saying we worked on these some?
Yes.
We did. How hard did we work on them?
100%.
Hard enough to finish them completely. Funny thing about that, that's why we call them finished. Yes? Now, you can call me silly if you want to. But when that number and this number are the same, that's how we're able to finish these. This is equivalent units of production for materials. I have the raw materials now that I need. Now I'm adding the labor and overhead enough to finish that entire batch. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that those two numbers are the same. Nick, did I work on these at all?
10% of them.
Hard enough to finish them 10% of the way. 10% times
5,000
is
500.
the equivalent of producing 500 units from scratch. If I completed each unit before I began working on the next one, if there was no beginning inventory and no ending inventory, and I worked this hard, then I would have produced 5,000 units. Nick, how many of those are finished?
15,500.
How many of those are finished? This last batch you're talking about. These 500. How many of these 500 are finished?
500.
500 are finished. Esther, how many of those are finished?
15,500.
With, in the topic Nick and I were talking about, just that one line. How many of those? 500 are finished. Tucker,
None,
why?
because it's not finished.
If they had been finished, we would have accounted for them on this line. It's a trick question. But I need reality set in too. Maybe it's not a trick question. If these had been finished, these 500 are not finished. They're partially finished. They're 10% of the way. But not one of these in this entire batch of 5,000 is finished. Are y'all with me or not? So, 15,500 is the equivalent units, not real actual units, but the equivalent units attempting to measure how hard we've worked. We've put in this much labor and this much overhead that if there'd been none at the beginning and none at the end, if all the work was in this month, this is how many we would have finished. Equivalent units. Pretend. If you've got a question about letter A, I would try to answer it. Josh?
Why do we compute? Why is that necessary?
This is the way we allocate cost. We're going to allocate them based on the production that we could have achieved to this month. B. Yes, Shane?
If, thinking like in a small business, if the manager is the one doing the accounting, I mean, who picks out the percentage for how, isn't that just a subjective judgment?
Could be. You mean the 10%? Where the 10% come from?
Exactly.
I would assume in real life they would have some benchmarks that they could measure that along the way. But there are some estimates and some educated guesses that we would make based on our experience. Yes, absolutely. I started to bring this up a minute ago when you were giving me the first answer, Josh, and now that you've reminded me to talk about the percentages, let's talk about this one more time. I hate, in a way, to give this away, but if I were you, I'd be real curious. Would you read in the production paragraph where it says beginning inventory 1,600 units that are 100% completest to materials and 30% completest to conversion cost? Do y'all see that? Beginning inventory, that percentage. Where did I use that any place here? Was it used at all in our calculations? It wasn't. And it's left over from the FIFO days. Do y'all remember in Monday's lecture when I told you we did FIFO for a long time? We needed that number in FIFO. But we don't need it under this method. Now, I don't know whether they've not edited it out of the book maliciously or just to give you that option to try to get you to fall for that trick. We need the one that describes the ending inventory. We need the 10%, but we never use that beginning one. If you want to do a never fool with that one. You just don't need it in the way we do it now. Here we go. B, compute the unit cost for materials. I need some help. I also need somebody to shut that back door for me. Richard, would you please? The unit cost for materials starts with the total cost for materials. Could you help me find the total cost for materials? I need a volunteer hand up. Some of you are looking at me instead of in your book. I would think that you would be curious enough to at least pretend. Put your eyes on your book and try to find them. Alexis?
Can you say
Yeah, it's right here in the book. I'm going right by these numbers. I'm doing exercise 21-11, and it's item B. Compute the unit cost for materials.
Okay.
The unit cost for materials starts with the total cost for materials. Can you find me how much we spent for materials? Bentley?
$20,000.
Where's that number?
It's on the second line, manufacturing cost, putting inventory cost.
All right, that's part of it. That's a good start. I should have read the paragraph, and I apologize for that. Let's read the whole paragraph. Manufacturing cost. Beginning inventory cost consisted of $20,000 of materials, $43,180 of conversion cost. Materials cost added in polishing this month were $177,200. Labor and overhead applied in polishing during this month, $102,680 for labor and $257,140 for overhead. Compute the unit cost for materials. Bentley got us off to a good start. Bentley says, in the beginning inventory, there are $20,000 worth of cost for materials. Bentley, you want to stay on the hook or off the hook? I need the total cost for materials. Can you help me?
Can I guess?
If you hadn't said that, you could just bluff me.
Well, 197,200.
197,200 is... I don't see that number in this paragraph anywhere.
Well, I added 20,000 to 177,200.
Yeah, but I've already got 20,000 right here, and I wanted to know what to add to it. Show your work.
177,200.
177,200 is the sentence, materials cost added in polishing during this month were 177,200. So I've got beginning inventories materials, and I've got the materials that we added this month. That sum is 197,200. Is that what you're telling me?
That's right.
Yes? Y'all with me or not? And the question is, unit cost. I need to divide by something. Esther? I'm going to divide by this 20,000 right here, Esther? No.
Well,
This 20,000. This one's units, that one's dollars. It was a trick. Right, Esther? I'm going to divide by this. This is materials. The total materials cost divided by the answer we got in letter A, 20,000 equivalent units of production for materials, is a unit cost of. If you don't have your calculator out now, it'd be a great time to get it out. You'd learn more if you participate. Esther, do you have me that number? This result? Do you have me this number?
9.8.
$9.80. 980. I got Esther on the hook. You didn't volunteer. Hang on a second.
9.8.
9.8. What's your calculator decimal set to?
9.86.
Ah, 9.86. You were holding out on me. I'm trying to be. I'm getting it down to the penny here. I need auditors on 9.86.
That's right.
It cost us $9.86 on the average for materials. The name of this is the average method. This is not FIFO anymore. And the reason it's called average is because we took last month's inventory and this month's materials and averaged them over this month's production. Because we summed, because we brought that in and included it in the sum, that's where it gets its name, average. So, B says, compute the unit cost for materials, and when you finish, compute the unit cost for conversion cost. I think there's a little learning curve going on here. I think you're better prepared to do this one because of what we've experienced. Can you help me? Chriselle.
The beginning conversion cost was 43,180.
The paragraph says there's $43,180 of labor and overhead in the beginning inventory. Keep talking.
And then they added 102,680 plus 257,000.
If I had room on the slide, I would have shown both those numbers individually. 102,680 and 257,140 are labor and overhead respectively. Yes? But I ran out of room. So I summed those two. Chriselle's summing them and got, if you don't know where the $359,820 came from, I would be willing to answer the question right this minute. I'm hoping that you're not just taking notes, that you're seeing where the numbers are coming from, maybe even being a step ahead and learning more that way. Then this sum, the beginning inventory of conversion costs plus the conversion cost we incurred this month, that sum needs to be divided by something to get the unit cost. Brandon, tell me what you're doing right this minute.
I'm adding the numerator.
Good. If you were a little ahead of where you are right this minute, don't let me distract you, and we're ready to divide by something, what would you divide by?
The equivalent units of production for conversion costs.
Is correct, say a number.
15,500.
15,500 is the amount we're going to divide by. 15,500 divided into that numerator, that sum. Brandon, are you almost there?
Yeah, 26.
Got it? Say it again.
26.
I named auditors.
That's right.
$26 a unit is what we spent for labor and overhead. Bentley, you've got a frown on your face. May I answer your question?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Well, I was thinking about the 15.5, and I see that we got it from these.
Each of these. The whole point of step one is to give us the information. So you divide step 2 by step 1. You divide step 2 by step 1. That's what you've been hearing me say over and over about the snowball effect. If you miss that first step, you're going to miss the rest of this because this causes this. This is used in the next step. We've got to get that first step right. Did I answer your concern?
Yeah.
Who's got a question so far? C says,
Actually, I have another question.
Bentley,
When we got the 359, 820,
this,
yeah, we added, was that labor for both 102, 680 and 257, 140?
one is labor and one is overhead. If you read the whole sentence, it says, labor and overhead applied in polishing during the month. So that first number is labor, the second number is overhead, and in Monday's lecture we talked about the definition of conversion cost being that sum. Good. Who's got a question? Yes.
Okay, so for the materials, I'm find that.
that's like the direct cost more so, and then the conversion cost is everything that wasn't direct, like indirect.
Direct cost meaning a chapter 19 kind of direct cost in that first homework problem you did?
Yeah, more so. Like the stuff that we use.
I think these are all going to be direct costs because they're part of the product we're producing. I think this is direct materials, this is direct labor and overhead. So I think these are all going to be part of the product that we're producing. Anybody else? C. Determine the cost to be assigned to the goods transferred out. My term for that typically is finished. If this is one of many departments, maybe they're leaving here and going to another working stage, and then transferred out would be appropriate. If this is the last stage of production before it goes to storage, then I'd call it finished. Determine the cost to be assigned to the goods transferred out and those still in process. So help me. Brandy?
Okay, so you would take the finished amount of units, which was 15,000.
We're going to work on just this line right this minute. We're going to concentrate on just those finished goods, Brandy says correctly.
Okay. And then you would multiply that by how much it costs to finish each unit, which is the 900K.
There are two ways we could do this. And you're going down one of those paths correctly. If we think about what it takes to produce a product, it takes materials, labor, and overhead. Then it's our responsibility to account for the materials, labor, and overhead that goes into the job. That completed product. And you just told me that $986 is the cost for materials. 15,000 units of materials at $9.86, Brandy, is
14,690.
that's 147,900. Is that what you said? I need an auditor on that now. Ooh, y'all didn't do it that way. Is it okay not to do it that way? Anybody remember how we did this in Monday's lecture? I don't want to talk about it right now. I want to talk about it in a minute as an alternative. In Monday's lecture, I told you I was going to show you an alternative. And I'm going to also show you why I like it better this way. Looks like a little more work, but I still like it this way. And I'll show you why. So, Brandy, is that the total cost of these goods?
No.
We had to talk about materials, labor, and overhead. You've accounted for materials. Don't you think we ought to talk about labor and overhead? Let's talk.
Okay, labor and overhead was $26
$26 a unit.
Yes, sir.
How many units of labor and overhead did we use?
We used
Here's a hint.
15.
You're accounting for this line, aren't you? How many units of labor and overhead are there here?
That's 15.
There's 15,000. And what I'm trying to get you all to see, would somebody multiply 15,000 times 26 so I can finish my thought? 390,000 has been suggested. Could somebody audit that?
Right.
What I'm trying to get you all to see is, what am I thinking right here? So to try to get you to see this in a way. Y'all with me here? Huh? Does it look like it's supposed to? What? Yes or no? I need to stay on the other side. Thank you. Okay. Oh, this is perfect. This is perfect. Okay, so I just saw these two numbers are the same, right? What am I thinking? Toby?
You can see the step by adding the total cost.
That's not what I'm thinking. We'll talk about that in a minute, Toby. I said I was going to talk about it. There's 15,000 units of materials. There's 15,000 units of labor and overhead. No wonder they were finished. If there's 15,000 units of materials, 15,000 units of labor and overhead, no wonder they were finished. This is the bear's porridge. This is the three bears, folks. This isn't too hot and it isn't too cold. It's just right. There was just enough labor and overhead to finish these goods. Did we work on these 15,100? No. We were finished with them at 15,000. Did we work on them 49,900? If we did, they weren't finished. How'd they get finished? By contributing 15,000 of labor and overhead to go with the 15,000 of the materials. So, let's sum this. 147.9 plus 390,000 is the total cost of goods finished. Help me out. 537,900. Managers like to know unit cost. Managers can use unit cost to make decisions. If I wanted to know the unit cost of this entire batch, what would I divide by?
28.
15,000. 537,900 divided by 15,000, anybody, is, it cost me $35.86 per unit to produce these goods this month. Last month, that number was $35. You're the manager. Are you happy or sad? I can't hear you. Next month, that number is $35.75. How do you feel? A little better. But it's better than it going up, right? You're with me or not? That's a good number. That's a good number for decision purposes. Josh?
It makes sense, but since the $26 was derived from 15.5, how is it that you can relate it back to the 15,000 when there's still $500 you accounted for to get the $26?
Woo!
Does that make sense?
I bet class probably sounds that way a lot when I talk that way, but I didn't get much of that. I heard every word. Could you give me one more chance, Josh? I want to face this direction.
The $26 was derived using the 15,005 in finished goods.
Because that was this month's effort on conversion costs.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But instead we used the 15,000 down below on the left. Instead
Because,
of 15,500.
okay, I think I might have it now. I might have it now. This is all the effort I expended this month. This is what it cost me per unit this month. But I'm working on two different batches of product. If you reread C, it says find the cost of goods finished, and when you finish, find the cost of the goods not finished. And right now we're just concentrating on these that we've already determined are finished. This batch, 15,000 units, cost me that much. I think that was the answer to your question.
Yeah.
I hope it was. Now, I think we did all that to make a journal entry. Anybody up for it? Brandy?
Okay. Unit credit, working process for the amount finished.
What's the name of this department? You know? Read the first paragraph. Does it say polishing?
Yes, the
Credit work in process polishing for, Brandy?
for the amount finished, which is the 537.
537.9. And debit?
The same amount to where it's going.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Make an assumption. Where is it going? And give me an appropriate account type.
Storage.
If it's going to storage, it's going to be debit finished goods. I'm going to make the assumption that it's going to another working area that is unnamed in the problem. So work in process next, debit, credit work in process this, where we are now. Or if this is the end of the line, debit finished goods, credit work in process, like we did last week. Okay, Brandy? Okay, class? Yes?
Yeah.
It's the flow of cost through the accounts. When these goods leave here, where do they go? Well, maybe it's time for us to do a little posting. Let's I may regret erasing that, but I hope not. Let's get us a work in process polishing account and see if we can find in the book everything we need to that belongs in this account. Don't let me make a mistake here, okay? I need your attention. I'm going to sort of direct this, but I don't want to overlook anything. So you help me here. It says beginning inventory was $20,000. It says it was $20,000 for materials and $43,180 for conversion cost. That was beginning inventory. This is beginning inventory materials, beginning inventory conversion cost. $43,180. And then this month we added labor and overhead cost $102,680 and $257,140. Do I have the facts right? Yes or no? Did I overlook anything? Yes, I did. I overlooked materials this month. I've got materials added this month of $177,200. Now do I have all the costs described in that paragraph? Yes or no?
Yes.
Would you be summing these
Yes.
while I go over here and grab this number that needs to be credited to that account?
I got this one.
$537,900. $537,900 was transferred out. This sum, just this sum. Anybody got it?
600,200.
600,200. Did I write what you said?
You did.
I need an auditor on that number, please.
Right.
600,200 minus 537,900 is the balance of this account at the end of the month. Nick, do you have this number for me?
62,300.
62,300 has been suggested. I need an auditor. Is the person in the cubicle next to you doing the same job you're doing? No. I think we need to develop ways to check our own work. And I think there's one very apparent here. Read C again. C says, determine the cost to be assigned to the goods transferred out. And we just did that. And determine the cost to be assigned to the goods in process. Well, here's why I like this format. Because you gathered up the materials, the unit cost that you needed. You've laid it out in a format that's familiar. We should be able to use a similar format to find the cost of the goods not finished. Let's do it like this. It takes materials, labor, and overhead to produce a product. I did regret erasing what I erased, okay? But in your imagination or in your notes, you should be able to look back. Do you remember when Brandy said, we're talking about the goods finished, and on that marker board I pointed to the F, and we did those 15,000 units? Well, if we're talking about ending inventory now, we're talking about the goods not finished. Can you look back in your notes and find the goods not finished? 5,000 units were not finished. And it says all the materials are added at the beginning of production. There are 5,000 units of materials here. What does a unit of materials cost in this department this month? $986. Is that what that number is?
That's right.
How about multiplying that out for me?
49,300.
Toby?
49,300.
49,300 auditors? Did we work on this batch at all? You can't audit your own work. They caught it. I let it go. How much effort did we expend on this batch? That's in your notes someplace. 500. Is that right? I don't even have anything written up there. I'm not thinking anything right now, apparently.
You're thinking something.
No wonder it's not finished.
That's right.
What? I can't get it. What did I say the first time?
No wonder they're not. They weren't.
No wonder they are not finished? What are
They weren't finished.
They? Is it they?
They.
They? No wonder they were. Y'all with me or not? That's the way. That's why I like to do this one like I did. This is not the way I did the Monday's lecture. You've been dying to hear this. I said I'd do it before the class was over. Let me finish this. I almost did it. I was so tempted. 500 times what? 500 times. You got it all laid out right here. This was just like that one, except these two numbers are the same. No wonder they were finished. And these two numbers are different. No wonder they weren't finished. Y'all with me or not? So, 500 times $26, that's what labor and overhead cost in this department this month. Anybody got me this number? 17,000 is that what I heard you say? 13,000. I want to compliment you. I gripe at you a lot. I'm hearing more of an answer, a wider participation than I've heard in a long time in a discussion group. Thank you for participating. 49,300 plus 13,000 is 62. This. Good? Makes you feel good? Now, I promised I'd say this. So let me show you the alternate of this one. That is the way I did it Monday. If you want to use that alternate because it's a little bit of a shortcut, it'd be okay to do that. If you take 986 and $26, that is the total cost of the good this month. Yes? Each unit costs that much this month. And you finished 15,000 of them. That's the same thing. It saves a step. You don't show your work quite as much. You get the answer faster. But I think the benefit of laying it out like this comes in proof. That when you've done that, you've rounded up all the information, and that makes the next step, the proof step, easier. That's just a personal opinion. Do you have a question about 21-11? One more time. Thank you for being a good class today. I really appreciate it. Have a nice day. Nice week.